What are the commonalities among leaders who sustain excellence over an extended period of time?
All right, Chandler, it's good to see you again, man. Welcome to the Learning Leader Show.
Ryan, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I know we've had a ton of back and forth. I went on your podcast, and you've been a mentor of mine from afar for a while, especially when it comes to thoughtfully building a business and certainly writing and publishing books. So first and foremost, I normally wouldn't do this, but for you, since you're so young yet so accomplished, can you share a little bit more about your backstory and how you've gotten to this point? You're the CEO of a multi-million-dollar business. You've built it. You have a team. You scaled it. I'm fascinated by all this, man. But what is it in you that's brought you to this place?
Oh man, yeah. It's so for context for people, I run a company called Self-Publishing School. We help people write and publish books. We've published about 6,000 books in the last 7 years or so. Just hit Forbes 30 under 30, a bunch of stuff like that. I think probably a deeply rooted desire to be an entrepreneur first and foremost. And just kind of growing up, I ran businesses in high school and college, and then got to college, realized I'm learning how to run businesses from professors who have never ran a business. That didn't make sense. So I dropped out, took kind of a more unconventional path that ultimately led to me going from, someone who's a C-level English student and a college dropout with ADHD, and who I hated reading, I hated writing, to ultimately writing books and running self-publishing school. And so I think it was realizing that, okay, the traditional path isn't working for me, but I've got to, so I'm dropping out of school, but I've got to operate like I'm still in school and take that learning to books. I always say it's like a book is a $15 mentor. The smartest, most successful people in the world have written a book. All we have to do is pay $15 and spend a few hours and we can read it. And so, and instead of looking for, maybe not finding a mentor for a lot of people, that's one of their goals to grow, is I said, well, hey, I've got access to these people. So I started rolling into books, and then that's really how I built my business in a lot of ways. Is just, I got a problem. What's the biggest problem in the business right now? Okay, what's the best book that I can read about that thing? And then now let me just read it and then implement what it says in that book, and then just keep doing that. And so I think that's been a big spark for growth, on top of just other maybe fundamental, like work ethic, discipline, all that stuff.
The other aspect of this that I really want to focus on is, because I think there may be someone who currently is like a VP at a Fortune 500 company who says, "Oh, I don't think this applies to me." I want, not only did I finish college, but I got my MBA, and I'm moving up in my career, up the chain when it comes to promotions and things like that. So Chandler's story, I'm not sure that helps, and I would say that's not accurate. And here's why. One, I think by now, if you've listened to this podcast, you know how I feel about writing, and the fact that the most effective leaders become good writers, and they work on that skill. The reason it's important to write as a leader is because writing is the ultimate form of clarifying your thinking. And to be an effective leader, you have to be a clear thinker. Can you share more? Now, you've worked with tons of clients to help them do this, of all ages and all ranges and all intelligence levels. Can you share more on why it's so important for leaders to be writers?
Yeah. Well, I think writing is crystallization of thought, right? And there's a reason why Jeff Bezos has the rule in his company, which is no PowerPoints, right? He wants you to crystallize it into a couple page memo, and then everyone can read that memo and then come into the meeting and discuss. And I'm finding this as we scale at Self-Publishing School is a lot of times people want to send a voice note or a Loom or a whatever, and it's just lazy. And I've strongly considered banning them, because it's like, it's laziness on the part of the person recording it. It's like, oh, this is the fastest way that I can record this thing, and then just send it to everyone and say, please watch this 5-minute Loom. And the next thing you know, you're watching 5-minute Looms all day. about important things rather than being able to crystallize thought and make decisions. So like you said, Ryan, I mean, writing is crystallization of thought, but then I also believe that a book is the best thing that you can do to grow your career, and to grow your business if you're running a business. But more importantly, if you're working at a company and you want to grow your career, you want to get promoted, you want to be known as a thought leader on whether that's in customer success, in sales, in product, in marketing. Like, crystallize your core methodologies into a book. That book can open up big accounts if you're in sales. That book can standardize your onboarding process if you're on the customer success side. Like, there's just so many ripple effects. The root word of authority is author, as they say. And for a lot of people, you become an authority by becoming an author. And yes, this applies whether you're running your own company or whether you're working within a company. I think it's one of the best ways to become indispensable, to get promoted, to get a raise. Like, I've just seen that play out so many different times.
What about the person? Because I've said this exact thing to somebody, and they're like, "Dude, you don't understand. I don't have time for this.
Yeah,
I just don't have time. I'm running his team. I'm already behind as it is." Yeah, easy for you guys to say, right? You can make your own schedules or whatever. Let's dispel that excuse right now.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest excuses. And I would say you don't have time not to. Because it is a short-term sacrifice, but you are creating a long-term asset. What happens when you create a book, and I talk about this in my new book, is like, you do work once, crystallize what you know into this thing that then goes on to impact thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even millions of people, right? But you've crystallized it into a book, and I call it leveraged impact, right? So it's like, you do that work and then it goes out into the marketplace, and it brings back lead sales and referrals for your business or authority or whatever else. And so, yes, it's a short-term sacrifice, but you're creating an asset that can be used as training material for your team, that can be used to get if there's two VPs and I'm considering promoting one of them them's written a book on the topic, who do you think I'm more likely to go with? Right? Or now your value in the marketplace just went up because you've become an authority on this topic. So there's just so many instances where it makes sense to take the short-term sacrifice. And no one that's written a book had time to write a book, myself included. And I know you can speak to this as well, Ryan, is like, but you've got to make the time. And if you do it, yes, there might be sacrifice for a year, maybe even a year and a half, maybe 2 years, however long it takes you. But in doing that, you've created an asset that will grow your career and grow your authority in the area that you're working in.
Because you're the CEO of a business that is growing. You probably have tons of meetings. You got people who always want your time. So you're right in the mix of somebody who is constantly, people are pulling at you. So when do you write? Like, what's your schedule when you're in book writing mode, which you probably are a lot, I'm guessing, because it's not like you've only written one book and stopped. You keep going. What is your book writing process to ensure you're a good CEO, you're doing your job, your day job, and you're taking time to write books?
Yeah, it's a really great question and a tough thing to balance. So I just did this recently with my newest book to show that this can be done at the highest level, right? Or maybe not at the highest level, but at a very high level. I've got 35 employees. We're running a big business. We're scaling. We're all that's kind of in that season. And so what I did, and what I recommend that people do, is just like, I really block it out and I get intense with it over a short period of time. So I picked up a pen. I want to say it was August 31st, September 1st, something like that. And then the book was published. Now this is like lightning fast, and this was my 7th book. So I'm not saying that this is like achievable for a lot of people, but went from that to book published, I want to say December 14th, 15th. And so there's about 105 days all told, is in my most recent book, from picking up a pen to the book was published, and launch week. So very fast. But what I do and what I recommend that people do is follow, I call this the more writing method. So mind map, outline, and then rough draft. And until you've got a rough draft done, nothing else matters. So the rough draft is like the most important thing. And then to answer your question on the habits and schedule and all that, I write in the morning. and I would stack my meetings in the afternoon. So like my first half day, and some days it'd be a full day, or when I'm in that heavy book writing mode, then that's for writing, right? Some people, they'll go a different path. They'll go, all right, I can only give 90 minutes a day or 60 minutes a day. Okay, do that for 90 days straight, 6 months straight, you got a book, right? If you're writing 1,000 words a day, well, if you can write for 60 days in a row, that's a rough draft of a traditional nonfiction book, right? So you could certainly, you can chunk it up, you can batch it, whatever works best for your schedule. But then that combined with having a really solid team and really solid leaders that you can lean on, to say, hey, I'm going into this season, I really need you to shield me from as much as possible. And if you, we always joke, it's like, if you need me, don't. But really, like, hey, only bring me stuff if it's like, if something's on fire. Otherwise, I trust you to make decisions and I trust you to move things forward. Because I know that short-term sacrifice, and there's some things that slip through the cracks and all that, but that 60, 90-day window, I created such a massive asset that I think will generate tens of millions of dollars for self-publishing school over the next 5 to 10 years. And so I knew it was really important that I needed to set aside that time.
That's an insanely fast turnaround. I will say, if you go the traditional route, which I have twice,
Yeah,
it's
not that fast.
Way longer. But I don't, nowadays you don't have to do that. I think you used to have to do that. You still can, and there are definitely advantages. There's pros and cons. We don't need to get into that now, because I think for the most part, people listening, it's probably smarter to go this route, like self-publishing school. And there are other companies that do stuff like this, Scribe, Page Two, right? This is not an advertisement for Chandler's company. He knows that. I believe in him. I think it's interesting. We're going to continue to have conversations as I continue to write, so there'll be things out there. Let's get practical for a second, man. Let's say someone's like, you know what, man, I've been thinking about this. People have told me I'm a good writer. I believe I am. I'm writing emails all the time. I'm addressing my team. I write speeches. Let's say someone now has finally said, okay, it's time to go, and let's do it through self-publishing school. I know I didn't mention this to you before we started. Are you willing to go there and like talk about like cost and time and the process and how it works?
Yep,
okay.
Of course.
So let's say there's this person. I'm certain that this is true right now. What do I do? What's the next step from okay, I have some ideas. I'm not exactly sure, but I have ideas. I know I can write. I've been doing it for a while. I want to publish a book, and let's say I want to get it done within 6 months. Where do we go? What should I do next?
Yeah, so I kind of like to break down this process. So we break down the book process, and I know a lot of people probably listening, not watching, but there's an image on page 17 of my new book. So basically, there's 8 milestones to going from idea to published. Mm-hmm. And at least that's how we try to simplify it and help people make progress on one milestone at a time, right? So you've got the first 4, what I call the more writing method. So you've got mind map, outline, rough draft, and then editing, and specifically self-editing. So that's the first 4, right? So then you go into professional editing, then you go into cover design, then you go into formatting, then you go into launching the book. This is like, I just zoomed past like a big high level, right? But to be very practical and answer the question that you asked, Ryan, it all starts with getting clear on what you want to write about, and then getting a rough draft done using the more writing method. So mind map, outline, rough draft. And so the idea phase, there's probably people listening right now where you're either in one of 3 camps, right? I have no idea what I would write about. I've got one idea that I think I could write a book on, or camp 3, I've got way too many ideas. There's like a bajillion books that I could write. I'm trying to figure out which one to write first. So the goal here is to crystallize on one idea. Depending on where you're at, if you're in the no idea camp, I would ask a few questions. Like, what are the broken record conversations that you keep having over and over and over again with clients, with prospects, with your team, at your company? What's the special sauce that makes you different? What do people come to you for advice on? Are all the other VPs coming to you for advice on this one thing because they know that you're great at it? Well, then that's probably a great book that you could write, right? And so that helps you get clear on what to write about. If you've got a bunch of ideas, I would ask the question of, hey, which one can I actually finish a rough draft the fastest? and kind of use that to get clear. But then the very practical exercise, like as soon as you're done listening to this episode, I would grab a blank sheet of paper, draw a circle in the middle, put your idea in the middle, set a timer for 15 minutes, and I'd write out everything you can think of on that topic. So what are the ideas that you have? What are the stories that you have? The lessons that you've learned, the broken record conversations, all those things. And in doing that, you're going to see that this could actually be a book. I've seen this happen time and time again with our students, with people that we work with. It's like, oh, wow, this is a book. And so then you're on your way to completing step number 1 in that more writing method, the mind map. And then that really makes the whole rest of the process a lot easier.
So what's next? Let's say they want to work with you. Price, timetable. Yeah. Do they get to talk to you? Actually, Chandler Bolt, someone on your team? Like, how does it work?
Yeah. So the first step for a lot of people, they'll go book a call with someone on my team. So you can go to self-publishingschool.com/apply. It's kind of basically the way that we start working with people is we have a first call, which is to get clear on your idea, get clear on your goals for your book and your next steps. So putting together a plan. And then if people are a fit and if they qualify to work with us, we kind of talk about what that looks like. But then, so if they say, hey, I want to work with you guys, typically $6,000 to $12,000 is kind of how much it costs. So you're going to get paired up with a coach on our team that's going to work with you one-on-one. This is an expert, someone who's a best-selling author, works with them throughout the process. We've got kind of a ton of templates and curriculum that they'll go through throughout the whole process to just make it easier. Like say, for example, press a couple buttons, 25-page Google Doc template comes out, and then you can fill in that when you're writing your book. Like that, just a bunch of things like that. So we've got coaching one-on-one, we've got curriculum, we've got workshops, like virtual workshops, like all these things that people get access to. We just started rolling out. We do people's covers now. We format their book. We upload it to Amazon. Like there's all kind of these services that come with that too. So previously that wasn't included, but we just added it like a couple months ago because people were spending thousands of dollars on this in addition to working with us, and we'd save a bunch of money, but we just said, hey, let's just do that for people. Our goal is to save people hundreds of hours in the process and to save them thousands of dollars in the process, and then help them write and publish a better book that sells more copies. So that's kind of the goal. I look at it kind of like a mix between Indiana Jones and Jillian Michaels. Like Indiana Jones blazed the trail, Jillian Michaels hold people accountable, like to actually do the work. And so that's kind of how we work. And then to answer the very specific question, yes, I still work with students and the community, not one-on-one, but in our group coaching call with our highest level students every single week, answering questions, giving people feedback on their titles and covers and kind of all the things.
Wow. So that could start right now for somebody. I think prompts and somebody pushing a bit, like a coach. I mean, a good coach right there, an advisor, a listener, bounce ideas. That's super useful to have. It can be an intimidating process, and one of the hardest parts is just getting started, like most things. Like start the run. Usually then can keep running or lifting weights or writing a book. I think the hardest part is getting going, and once you get going, and I've done this with both of my books, the beginning idea doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the last idea. It usually evolves and changes. The title changes a little bit, right? But you have to get going before that happens. If you just think of it, you're never going to get there, because the way you learn is by actually doing it, by writing it, by talking with others and bouncing ideas and meeting with editors and things like that. I think that's been super helpful for me through the process, where I may have started here, but it didn't finish there. But the important part was just getting started.
Yeah. And I'm really committing to yourself and committing to someone else. So a little bit of public accountability, right? For some people, that's publicly announcing that they're doing a book. For some people, it's, paying to join self-publishing school. People who pay attention, right? And so it's like, oh, I've paid this money. Now all of a sudden I am in this. Or for you, it's probably signing the deal for your first book or for your next book. So it's like, all right, I now signed this publishing deal. I've got a manuscript deadline. Like, this is happening, right? And so there's got to be some sort of commitment to transition from this place where according to New York Times, 81% of people surveyed said, hey, I want to write a book. Well, we know that less than 1% of people actually do it. So it's going from I want to I am doing it. And whatever that takes to get you there, I think it's very important. And it's really one of, if not the first step for people to say, hey, I'm actually doing this.
I think, and from your book, you accomplished this, so I assume your clients get the same service, is that I have seen some kind of paperbacks that people go through Amazon where when you get it, and these are, random friends who I respect that have taken the time, but they maybe have not, I think you can go straight through Amazon and do it, even paperbacks, but you can tell, you get it, and you're like, this is, it feels and looks terrible. And regardless of who you are, it's hard not to judge the book by its cover and by how it feels and looks. And so how do you ensure that this looks like a professionally well done published book, like similar to traditionally published books, which you can tell that they look and feel good? I think that's really important because people, I agree. You judge them by how they look and feel.
Yeah. So there's a couple key things you mentioned. One of them, Ryan, is people judge your book by its cover. So you need to have a good cover. I've got a whole chapter on this in my new book. It's a good book cover. I like to think of it kind of like a billboard. And so it's the billboard for your book, right? And so what does a good billboard do? Well, the same thing that a good cover does. It grabs attention. Your title is easy to read, and it's preferably in the upper third of your cover, right? And then people instantly understand what the book's about and whether or not it's for them. Right? So I'm using my book as an example. Grabs attention, red cover, title is easy to read. You instantly understand what the book's about. Right? There's a saying, confused people don't buy. If I'm not clear about what the book is and whether or not it's for me, I think you've done a great job of this with your books. Like I'm just looking at this, like The Pursuit of Excellence grabs attention. The title's easy to read, The Uncommon Behaviors of the World's Most Productive Achievers, right? So it's clear, it's easy to read. And then I love, I think I commented this to you previously, but Welcome to Management. Like I love that title and that hook, How to Grow from Top Performer to Excellent Leader. I instantly understand, oh, I'm a new manager. This is for me, right? And so that's what you need to do as an author is all those things on your cover, but then I also talk about how your self-published book shouldn't look self-published, right? The beauty of Amazon is that no one knows or cares whether you're self-published or traditionally published if your book looks legit. Right. And if it has a lot of reviews and it looks interesting and it looks like it's well done. And then kind of like you said, the litmus test of like, all right, when I get this book in the mail, does it look professionally done? And so your self-published book shouldn't look self-published. You need to spend time making sure that it's high quality.
And that's all stuff you guys do. You're thinking about that. Yeah. You're making sure that happens because, like I said, I've seen the ones who go because you can go straight through Amazon Publishing. Is that true?
Yeah, and I actually do. And so what you got, I think there's a couple different versions that we sent out, but I think what you got is directly through Amazon. But you need to do it the right way.
Okay, yeah, because there's different ways to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and or people will just slap a cover. They won't follow instructions. They won't work with.
So I think what that shows is, So it's funny. Right before this podcast earlier today, I'm planning one of my events, my personal excellence workshop. It's a small event, mainly for my Learning Leader Circle members, and I invite a few extra people too, some guests. And I was meeting with an event planner, event coordinator, because I've done it by myself the last few years. And I am an attention to detail guy, and I think about all that stuff. But you know what happens with all that? It takes a massive amount of time. Yes. And it's probably, I'm not an event planner. I probably should not be doing that. That's why I spoke with her, and I was just saying like, oh, this is going to be so nice. Right, because one, it's going to be better. It'll be done a lot better because I'm going to hire a pro. Yes, I'm going to spend some money up front, but I believe it'll be worth it. And then I will only focus on being excellent when I'm teaching and sharing and thinking only about it, not about all of the behind-the-scenes stuff that you do when running an event. The same thing with a book. I feel like it's worth the upfront investment to work with pros so this artifact, this thing you're creating, looks and feels excellent. So it's like, this is well done. So I think that's part of it. Yes, it does take more money up front, but I think longer term, it's way worth it.
Yeah, I agree. It's an asset.
Yep.
That is permanently out in the world, bringing back lead sales, referrals, all those things. And you want it to be a great first impression.
Talk about books as, for you, it feels like they're a big part of your marketing plan. So I know you give them out at speaking events. You're regularly pushing them. I know we're going to do a little giveaway with my listeners here at the end. I'll tease. So share more about why they can be such a great tool. Great. By the way, it goes without saying that the contents inside the book have to be excellent. Okay,
Needs to be great.
I'm not telling anybody just to get a book out there as a business card or a marketing tool. Table stakes are the book must be great. So let's take it a step further from that. How have you used this to help build your business and to use it as a great marketing tool?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and it's, a lot of people say, hey, a book is a new business card. And I agree with that, but it needs to be done well. Right. And I actually think a book is better than a business card, because if you give someone a business card, they're going to throw it away within 24 hours. Like, that's just what happens. Right. We go to an event, someone gives us a card, it probably gets left in the hotel room. But if
do you even have business cards anymore?
I don't. No,
I don't either. I don't have cards.
I briefly had them. I don't know that I've given a single one out, but I learned this from my buddy Hal Elrod. Like, I take this book everywhere now. I've got 5 boxes of them right there for an event coming up and from an event that we just did. And I take them everywhere and I give them out. And so if I'm going to the chiropractor, if I'm going to a mastermind, going to an event, whatever, hey, giving people books, it's memorable. I'm building community, but then I'm also, hey, give this book. So get very, very practical. I look at, how do I use a book to get more leads, sales, and referrals, right? So leads, these are people who hear about me because of my book. So these are people who hear about my book published. They would never know about self-publishing school, but they found that book, right? So they hear about the business through the book. Then there's more sales. So this is getting more of the people who already know about you to do business with you. And so that's where, to kind of your point, we use the book throughout our sales funnels and stuff like that to get people to give us their contact information, or to show up for an appointment, or show up for stuff, which leads to increased sales conversion, like across everything. And so that's the second piece. And then referrals, which is, how do you turn your customers into active referrers? And so I give, what I recommend is that people give 2 copies of their book to every single new customer or prospect and say, hey, here's one for you and one for someone you know who needs help with the problem that you solve with your book, right? So for me, here's one for you. Here's one for someone you know who needs help with writing and publishing a book, right? And there's a bunch of other very simple things that we do to just allow our customer base to just gift the book to anyone they know on their behalf, who's thinking about writing a book. And that just brings people back into our ecosystem. So I recommend it in all those ways. And that's why it's so intentional for us, is because the book, like you said, the book is valuable. It's my goal is to drop the mic on the subject. Whereas, like, people read it, they're like, oh my gosh, this is the only book I need to know. And if they hear about someone writing a book, they say, you need to read this book. And in doing that, people read the book, they say, this is really helpful. I'd love a little bit more help. And so that's the goal with the book. But even getting very practical for your audience of VPs or people working at Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, is if you're in sales, that's an easy one. Send it to every decision maker at every big company and big account that you're trying to get into. They will take your calls and they will book a meeting with you. And it's, a book is $4 or $5. A business card is 50 cents or something. So, I mean, it's not much more expensive, but the impact is way greater. But then also with decision makers, if you're trying to get promoted, I would send it to everyone up the chain that has decision-making ability to promote you or to include you on offsites or leadership strategics or any strategic meeting. Like, send it to important people, and it'll make a big difference and open doors.
I think it's an intimidating thought. Part of why I wanted to record with you, Chandler, is to make this less intimidating for people who think that's just for other people. It's not anymore. I do think it used to be. It's not that way anymore. So for that person who is intimidated by the thought, say, there just seems like too much work involved, even beyond the writing. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Which the writing, don't get me wrong, is a ton of work, and it's not easy. It's not meant to be easy. But it shouldn't be an intimidating thought anymore to actually get a book published, even if you don't view yourself as an author, or if you are a sales rep or a manager or VP. I mean, if you're a CEO, you absolutely should be writing books of a company. I think, to, if anything, for the culture of your own business, right? So your people kind of know where you're at. So I think that's a big part of it. Can you share more about that aspect of it when it comes to that it shouldn't be intimidating anymore?
Yeah, and I love that. So there's two things I'll share. You said if you're a CEO, if you're like, my book is, I'm onboarding a new assistant right now. My book is part of the onboarding process for every new employee, right? What's the fastest way that they can become familiar with our product, our mission, what we do, and what we believe in? Read my book. And so it's a way to scale, especially if you're a CEO, of VP, or of a growing or large organization. Well, the fastest and best way to literally be able to spend one-on-one time with every new person that comes into your company is write a book about your methodology and include that in the welcome packet, or the welcome swag bag or whatever. Right. And so, but then to answer your question about why should it not be intimidating, I was in Scouts growing up, and I remember my Scoutmaster, we were out on this camping trip. And I said, hey, are there bears in the woods? And he said, well, yeah, Chandler, there's bears. That's why we're hanging up our food in the tree, so that the bears can't get it. I said, well, hold up. What happens if we see a bear in the woods? What do we do then? And he said, well, here's good news. He said, if we see a bear, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than your friend. And just kind of winked and it's like, well, hold up. What does this have to do with being intimidated about writing a book? When it comes to writing a book, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know a little bit more than the person that you're teaching, right? And so I think a lot of times we get in our way and we say, hey, who am I to write a book? Do I have time to write a book? There's this imposter syndrome. Write the book for someone who's 2 steps behind you. And I don't know about you, Ryan, but I love reading books from people who are 2 steps ahead of me, not 20 steps ahead of me. Definitely. Because if they're 2 steps ahead of me, that's more practical and it's more useful because they were just recently in that thing. And so that's where you don't have to know everything. Write about what you know. And if you just know a little bit more than the person that you're teaching, like that is going to be really helpful for them.
I think one prompt that helps me is sometimes I will draft and write. We'll get practical for a second. As if I'm writing an email to one person or even a text message to one person. I probably wrote 25% of my last book on my phone. In the Notes app, in Evernote, Google Docs, where I'd pull it up and maybe an editor or a writing coach would supply me with a few questions, and I would type them out on my phone, sometimes on the elliptical, on a walk, wherever, answering a question to a single person. And then sometimes from that, a story comes, or I think of the research to back up the story, or I think of some of the practical application that I would give advice to that one person. And so that is a way to make it a little bit easier on yourself, because we all respond to emails. We all get questions and we answer them. So make it easier on yourself. And I bet some of your templates, I'm guessing, help with this, right? Where you make it so it's more Q&A-ish and less kind of stand up and lecture. I think of that one, both public speaking. If you're like, hey, let's just go do Q&A. Oh, who can't do that? Of course I can do that. I'm going to be prepared, but it's different than getting up and giving a lecture. And I think that's some of the way to make it a little bit easier is to think of one person you're giving advice to, one person you're responding to an email, one person you're responding to even in a text message. That way, thinking of it that way makes it, again, easier to get started. Then once you get started, it's easier to keep going.
Yeah. Well, I 1,000% agree with that, Ryan. It also makes for a better book. And an easier to write book, because so many times people go into book writing land. It's like, to whom it may concern. It's like we're writing to this big audience. But if you say, I talk about this concept of it's the 4 P's of a best-selling book: person, pain, promise, and price. Right. So who's the person that you're writing to? What's the pain that they have that they know that they have? And what's the promise that you're making with this book? Right. And then the price is a little bit more straightforward on the book side of things, depending on the format. But so you were speaking to the first one, which is the person that you're writing to. And we are so aligned on this. If I know the person's and it's actually someone I know. So if I say, oh, this book is for Ryan, well, then I'm going to write that book as if I'm writing a letter to Ryan. And then all the things that crop up when you start writing a book, like, oh, how should I write this? What tone? Should I be funny? Should I use this story? Should I not? The answer to all of those questions is just, how would I write this to Ryan?
Yeah.
And when you do that, you write a better book faster, and you write it to Ryan, which means, okay, when I go to market the book, I'm like, okay, well, what podcasts are Ryan listening to? What events is he going to? How does he find books? And so then I'm marketing it to Ryan. And then guess what? There's a ton of other Ryans out there who are like, hey, this feels like this was written to me. Right. And so it just makes for a much better book.
Yeah. Are you okay? We shift gears for a second, because I love that we've really hammered the book writing process and why people should write books. Okay. The other thing you've done extremely well, and I want you to take me to the beginning of it because I don't really know the origin of it, is that you, like you said, you scaled your business to 35 employees. And I know, because I've worked with your team through the course of being on your podcast and through scheduling all this. I know this was a pain to schedule, and that was all my fault. But beside the point, we got here. We're here today. Is how to make that decision, because I'll tell you, Chandler, I probably shouldn't put all this, but I will, because it makes it, I guess, easier for you to answer. To me now, I can do a lot of the stuff and keep my business insanely profitable.
Yeah.
Right. With keynote speaking is super profitable. The leadership circles I run is very fulfilling, and there's a lot, all the services, right? The building leadership development programs, all of this. With that said, it's just a ton of work. It's a lot of work. And I'm doing a lot of things that probably are not within my native genius because I can, and because there's not somebody else to do them, so then I have to do it. Now I outsource editing my podcasts and all the video stuff like that, right? But for the most part, I do a lot of things on my own. You made the call to say, no, I'm building a business. I'm going to scale. Yeah. I'm going to hire people. I'm going to cut into some of that profit in order to build. Can you just, and you especially as a younger dude, I feel like you think way ahead of your years. Can you just walk me through your philosophy and thought process on saying, I'm going to cut into some of the hard-earned profit in order to build this thing to scale quicker and to bigger, so I can impact more people?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a lot of nuance to that, Ryan. I think what you're speaking to is profit percentage versus net profit, right? And so sometimes it's like we'll see that profit percentage go down, but actually net profit will grow much higher because we're doing higher volume on revenue. Now, that's not always the case. One of my favorite quotes is, and I think you've kind of nailed this with your business, is revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is king. Right. So revenue is kind of just a vanity metric that people like to toss around. And profit is sanity, because if you don't have profit, then, what are you doing? What are you doing with the business? And then cash is king, though, because you can be profitable and run out of cash. And if you're out of cash, you don't have a business because you can't pay the bills. And so I think through structuring that, but then I think through one of the early thoughts I had is, how can I get out of delivery as quickly as possible, or at least raise the bar for what I am delivering on? And so that's where I started training coaches early on, and just thinking about scale. But it's like one of the simplest metrics, a simple metric, and then a first hire, I think would be very applicable for you specifically, but then also to other people who are going through this, is the simple metric: take your take-home pay for last year, divide it by 2,080, and whatever that number is, that's your hourly rate. Now, the question becomes, how do I raise that hourly rate? Well, the way that you raise the hourly rate is you've got to stop doing things that you could pay someone to do for less than your hourly rate. Now this gets really intimidating. I forget what my most recent is, but it's like hundreds and hundreds, if not a couple $1,000 an hour. And so now it's like, okay, well, and that's what I tasked my assistant is, all right, your number one KPI is taking things off my plate that can be done for under $400 an hour, $1,000 an hour, or whatever the number is, right? And so that becomes a bigger list. And an hour is an hour. Like people get real weird about this, myself included. When I was starting, just come from a very blue collar background. My parents met working night shift at a factory. So it feels weird. Like, oh, I'm not one of those people that have an assistant.
So you're not mowing your grass. You're not cleaning your house. You're not doing dishes.
Exactly.
You're not doing
because an hour is an hour. Yeah. If people are like, oh, I'm hiring an assistant, they need to do work stuff. And they feel weird being like, oh, I have someone come to my house and do my laundry and go get groceries and take my car to get the oil change and all that. It's like,
so you're talking about 24 hours. You're not talking about 8 a day, like yes, 24.
Exactly. Because it's an hour, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I could either take that hour and be working on my business, or I could take that hour and not be doing those things and just be, rest, rejuvenate.
This could apply, by the way, to somebody who's not running a business, but somebody who works as a high level thinker. They're a leader within a business of offloading some of these some of these other tasks to somebody else. And
sure.
I think it applies to that too.
If you're a VP making 150, 250K a year, people laugh at this. If you can't convince your company to hire an assistant, I think you should hire one out of your own paycheck. And it might be, okay, you might be a year to two before you're like, okay, this definitely is ROI positive. But if you think about, if you're a VP working 60, 70 hours a week, could you gain back some of that time in your personal life or in your business life that would lead to a better performance, a better relationship with your wife or husband or significant other? Would it lead to like all those things? Absolutely it would. And so I think knowing what your per hour rate is, hiring an assistant as the first hire, and then thinking through, okay, systems and process so that I can scale and so that I can delegate and all that. That was a big part of what we started doing from the front. And then what I've kind of continued to emphasize is, all right, we've got to be able to do things that don't scale, of course, but we've got to be able to do them at scale. By building systems and process.
So one of the things too is you're kind of the star of your business, but I feel like you've done a good job of elevating others and trying to not make yourself the star.
Yes.
Now, I didn't have a plan coming into this because it was just following my curiosity to learn from thoughtful people on the podcast. Right. But what inevitably happens is when somebody calls, they don't want you. This is not a bragging thing. This is just the reality that I actually don't want. But when they call,
they want to talk to Ryan.
When they email you and don't get me wrong, like I'm going to go give speeches on stages because it's scary, because it's fun, because it's profitable, because I like that challenge. Like it's pushing my edges. But there are other things. Come develop our plan or do this or be at our office that. Honestly, man, it's too much. There's too much, and so ideally you could scale in some better way. You've figured that out a bit. It feels like that's why I asked. So they get Chandler, and you're like, well, not necessarily. I'll do the group stuff, but I'm not doing as much. So, what are some ways when a business, maybe even mistakenly, was built on a person's name?
Yeah.
And that person, and John Maxwell's figured this out, and Lencioni and John Gordon, and there are people out there who have figured this out. I realize Liz Weissman a bit, although Liz is better about it at the beginning. What are some ways that then you were able to get away from just trading time for dollars because you've run out of time?
It's a big question. I think it's very important and not a lot of people consider it. So I think having a personal brand and selling the personal brand is the fastest way to 6 figures and maybe even your first million. Because people connect with a person, they don't connect with a company. They connect with a person more than they connect with a company.
For sure.
Right. So I like and connect with Ryan more so than I would connect with maybe a bigger brand. But then it's exactly what you say. Then you reach this point where now, okay, I've got a nice paying job. I don't have a business because it's fully built around my brand. And so for me, I use the personal brand up front. And then we slowly started pushing self-publishing school to the front and Chandler Bolt to the back. Where it's this catch-22, because I actually still want to grow my personal brand using self-publishing school, because first decade or whatever of my business life, I was bringing sweat equity to deals. It's like, cool, I've got no money and no name, but like I'll work harder than anyone. And I'm bringing that into a deal. Well, now I've built up a bit of a profile. So I want to be like a Tim Ferriss or like a Gary Vaynerchuk or whoever else, where I'm bringing my name to the deal and some connections to the deal. And I don't want to bring as much sweat equity, if any sweat equity, to that deal, because there's no leverage in that, unless I'm, plugging in sweat equity of my team or stuff like that. Right. So I was very intentional about using that in the beginning, but then phasing it out and then putting self-publishing school at the forefront. And then very practically, there's just setting up limits of like, okay, if this is speaking in front of 100 people or less, we're going to use one of the speakers on my team that we've trained. If this is speaking to a bigger event, I'll speak. If this is, so just having, some parameters around that. And it's not an overnight thing. Training out a speaking team, training out coaches to deliver, and you still will, and I still get the questions like, oh, cool, but can I talk to Chandler? And your team's got, you have kind of some talk tracks or some deflection of like, no, but I run this and I can definitely help you with this. So let's chat. And
let's go to the beginning.
It's like, what's that?
Yeah. Let's go to the beginning though. So there was a point where Chandler was a solo business. Whatever, I don't even know what the name was at that time. It probably was different, I'm guessing.
Yes.
When was that? How many years ago? And then how did you? What was the beginning of building that beyond just you by yourself? Like first hires, what did they do? I'm sure you messed one or two of them up or more, right? Yeah. That's normal. Like what was that like at the beginning of the build?
Yeah. So 2014 is when we launched. It was called Bestselling Book System. There was three of us, business partners. And that was proof of concept. Then we got proof of concept. One of the business partners wasn't pulling his weight. So we said, kind of couldn't agree on what was going to happen. So we said, all right, we're out. We'll just rebuild it. Then two of us, we launched self-publishing school, two business partners. That started taking off. Hired our first employee, was customer service, because we knew, hey, we're drowning in customer support tickets and stuff like that. So that was the first thing. And then I wish I would have hired an executive assistant that also did all of our customer service. I didn't know that was an option at the time. That would have been my first hire going back. And then part-time coaches who went through the first iteration of our curriculum, and published books. So they knew all of so we didn't have to train them. They just went through it and they just did it with their book, but we trained them on our coaching process. And then now I am pulled out within maybe 18 months because I'm just looking at my calendar and saying, hey, what are the biggest chunks that it's like, unless I remove this, I'm going to be spending all my time in fulfillment mode and not in working on the business versus in the business kind of thing. And so then we had coaches. And so then now I'm no longer coaching pretty quickly. And then I have the weekly, which is, we still do this to this day, because I want to have my fingers on the pulse of what's going on with our customers and our students. And it's also with like, oh, you want to talk Chandler? Great. Yep. Join self-publishing school, show up to the weekly call. You can definitely talk to Chandler, and there's only one way to do it. Like, I don't do personal consulting. I don't do any of that because it's just not scalable. People offer and they'd be willing to pay a bunch of money, but it just doesn't make sense. It's hamster wheel revenue that involves me personally. And so that was kind of how I looked at it, is all right, we've got to start building systems and process, and then ultimately bought out my business partner and became sole owner of the company. And Bill, I've got a lot of partners now. They're just my employees. And some of them have profit share. A lot of them have incentive-based comp. So like they do well when the company does well.
Do you share your revenue numbers?
Yep.
What like where are you guys at now? So you started
9.1 last year. We've been on the Inc. 5000 list, years in a row, and typically grow somewhere between 20 to 40% a year, like year over year. We did 9.1 last year. I think goal is 12.6 to 14 this year.
How much of that do you like how much of that is top line versus like take home profit?
Yeah, take home somewhere between 25 to 33% net on that. So it's very, very healthy margin. But we've been very intentional about that.
How do you decide how much to pour back in versus just take off the table?
It's really tough, because there's no exact science. When I'm thinking about reinvesting in the business, I think about, is this building a long-term defensible moat? Am I investing in something that is building a long-term defensible moat, or am I poorly using money just and calling it investing in growth, but it's really just wasting money? Which you never know. There's no like scientific calculation. It's like, when the quants and the finance people run the company, innovation is going to stop. So it's like, I have to balance that finance brain for myself with the innovation growth. Like, we need to be growing at 50, 75% year over year, like kind of that, just wanting to drive. So it's really hard. But I try to make sure that we're investing in things that are a long-term defensible moat.
What's an example of that?
Yeah. So it might be like content and SEO. We developed, or honestly, this book, it's an asset that for years and years and years. So it's like, okay, let's invest in that and the sales of that. Then we have an R&D budget that is just to help us, because we realized early on we're not innovating as much as we want to. And that's because we're viewing it as an expense, not an investment. So if we have an R&D budget, research and development, then we have a training budget. So that's part of the P&L that we forecast. And we say, oh no, this is like a budget that's set aside. Yeah. So then when you're spending to do that thing, it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm taking this directly from my pocket, which, yeah, I guess is technically true. But we've made that decision kind of ideologically to strategically invest in these ways in the business.
What's your long-term goal? I mean, I struggle with these, by the way. So if you do too, feel free to just pass. But longer term, do you have these giant ambitions to $100 million business, $1 billion business? I mean, is that what you think that's within the realm of what you're trying to do?
For me personally, yes. It's not for everyone. I mean, my goal is to run $1 billion company that long after I'm off this earth, it's still making a difference. It's part of my legacy. And so that's a long-term goal. And that's going to happen. Not a matter of if, but when. And I don't know if I'll get there with self-publishing school. Like, self-publishing school might have a cap of 50, 100 million a year. But the goal is to publish 100,000 with self-publishing school, is to publish 100,000 books by 2035. So we're about 6,000 to 7,000 books published so far. In the first 7 years, we published somewhere between 1 to 3 books a day. We need to get to more about 10 to 15 books a day more consistently. And then that's what it's going to take to hit 100,000 by 2035. If we can get there within the next 4 or 5 years and start turning that over. So that's the goal with self-publishing school. And that's what we're working towards.
What you could live a really cozy, comfortable lifestyle by just kind of cruising along where you're at now. Healthy profits. Why not just chill out a little bit and let the business go? Like, it's funny that you think that's funny, but I'm serious. Like, what, you know what I mean?
No, it's just funny because that's, what my mom asked, what my girlfriend asked, what a lot of people ask. Because I'm passionate about it. I love it. And I think, it's what I was put on this world to do. I think it's, I was given gifts. My faith is important. So I feel like God gave me gifts and talents in business. And like, this is the way that I can make a difference. And I feel like business is the best vehicle for change that exists, right? Yeah. You get to change the lives of your customers. You get to change the lives of your employees. You get to create a profit, which changes your life, your family's life, future generations. And then you get to take some of that profit if you choose to. And like, we've built schools, we've built homes, we've like all these things through nonprofits. So then that creates a ripple effect. It's a powerful vehicle for change. And I could stop working today. We've got enough systems where it would keep going and it would fund my lifestyle and all that. But I don't know, I've got bigger goals. And
a lot of this is my own projection, as you could probably gather. I'm sure listeners can gather. And I think people can appreciate me following my own genuine curiosity here of trying to learn, because one day I interviewed Brad Stulberg, who has 2 full empty days a week, workday weeks, not including Saturday and Sunday, where he
Yeah.
just thinks and writes and reads. That's all he does. And then 3 days where he's a one-on-one coach. And I was like, well, how do you scale that? Like, how do you grow that? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm
It's
not.
like, I don't want to, and that's
No,
fine.
I don't want.
Yeah.
This is the best possible lifestyle for me. I have good clients. I'm sure I'll, they'll grow and change a little bit because they cycle on and off, right? But I make plenty of money, and I have 2 days a week, not including the weekend, where I think and write and I read,
Yeah.
and I don't want to scale. I love my lifestyle. And then I talked to Chandler Bolt, and you're the opposite of that. And I am sitting here thinking, I'm not sure which one. I'm not sure. And so like when I share that kind of information with you, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think being flexible and designing to the lifestyle that you want and not what you think you're supposed to do or need to do. Right. And so it's not keeping up with the Joneses and, oh, this sounds cool that Chandler did this, so maybe I should do that too. But then I think there's a second piece, which is seasons of life. Which one thing that I've really been wrestling with is, if you always say you're in a busy season, then it's not a season. It's just how you live your life. And so I think I'm very guilty of that. It's like, oh yeah, it's just a really busy time right now. It's like, okay, well, if you've said that for months in a row or years in a row, is it really a busy time, or is this just how you're choosing to live your life? Right. And so there's that, but there's also like, I'm not married yet. I don't have kids yet, that sort of thing. And so I know that I will be more intentional. And I think I have a high motor and, high achiever, kind of like I enjoy it a lot. So yes, will I probably always be on that spectrum? Maybe. But will that ebb and flow? Most definitely. Like that's going to change when I have kids. That's going to change like with different things like that. And so I'm trying to find better ways to build that into the ongoing rhythm and balance. And one of the things, maybe you've noticed this, and I think a lot of probably VPs and people at big companies have noticed this, is as your company grows, the company starts to plan further out than you do. And what happens is that means you get the leftovers. And so I think we have to be very disciplined to say, all right, I'm going to plan. And a mentor of mine, and he's an advisor for Self-Publishing School, Michael Hyatt, he talks about, hey, you've got to put those things in first. And so the first part of planning your year should be planning all the time off and then plan all the other stuff around it. And so that's what I'm wrestling with a little bit right now is I've got a team, I've got systems, I've got all this stuff. They're doing a great job of planning ahead. And I'm noticing that my vacation stuff just gets planned out because it's like, oh, I'm going to do a vacation. Oh, crap. We've got this webinar with so-and-so. We've got this podcast interview. We've got me speaking at this thing. And then you just end up not doing it. So I'm trying to be more intentional about planning further out with my personal time.
This is good, dude. I know we went over, and out of my own kind of desire to learn from you, and that's why this podcast though is so cool to me, because I could talk to a really seasoned guy like Ken Blanchard who has built a big awesome thing, and then I could speak to Chandler Bolt and everything in between, and it's just I'm grateful for the opportunity, man, to speak with you. And I know you mentioned to me before we started recording that you wanted to do a little bit of a giveaway now if people have hung with us this long. What can you share more about that?
Yeah. So for anyone who wants to check out my new book, it's called Publish: The Proven Path from Blank Page to 10,000 Copies Sold. I narrate the audiobook. You can listen to it on audio if you're an audio person, which you probably are if you're listening to this podcast. But if you want a free physical copy of the book, so I'd love to give 50 free physical copies. There's no strings, there's no pay shipping and handling. There's none of that. All you have to do is go to published book, like I published a book. So publishedbook.com/Hawk. Ryan's last name, publishedbook.com/Hawk. I mean, it's in the running for best last names, probably up there with Bolt, I'd say. But publishedbook.com/Hawk. First 50 people, I'll ship you a physical. We'll print it, pack it, ship it, everything for free. You don't have to pay anything. So check it out if you're interested.
Dude, I really appreciate it. I know we'll be talking as we both progress, and I appreciate your team sending me everything in regards to your work. Obviously, I think I don't even have to tell you to buy the book. You get the book for free. So go to publishedbook.com/Hawk. The book's called Publish: The Proven Path from Blank Page to 10,000 Copies Sold. And the cool thing about this is I'm a published author of 2 traditionally published books. You'd think I know everything when it comes to this, and I think I do know a lot. I was learning stuff on almost every page, and I've already published multiple books. So I that's why I think if you're curious at all about potentially doing this, it's a great free resource that you can get to use, and I encourage people to do it. And I'm just a fan of your work, man, and I want to support good stuff, and you're certainly one of those. So thank you so much for doing this, man. I obviously certainly want to continue our dialogue as we both progress, man.
Ryan, you're the man. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, dude.